Hello, and thanks for visiting Behind Enemy Lines here on Ward Media and Entertainment. Today we're getting in local politics as I sit down with Mr. David Alex Hayes, who's running in 2019 to become Knoxville's next at-large city councilman in Seat B. I met up with David at Knoxville's Birdhouse Community Center to discuss David's take on some of Knoxville's recent votes, the policies he's paying attention to, and what issues he'll be focusing on in his 2019 campaign and beyond. As we begin our talk, I brought up David's endorsement by groups like Knoxville DSA and much more. Thanks again for tuning in, Knoxville, and please be sure to come out and vote this August. So what we were saying is there are people who are more conservative. They participate in groups that are critical of anybody with the name socialist associated with them. What kind of issues would you focus on to get those voters to reconsider and possibly come out and vote for you?
It's interesting. I was actually recently at a libertarian event, and those folks loved me. It was great. I think even if you're conservative, getting in line with the model of saying that we need actually more democracy and something affects you, then you should have a say in it. So it's not necessarily saying that we want big government, right? It's saying that we want strong communities. We want strong communities that are making decisions for ourselves, and the government to step in when necessary, when it's able to empower our communities to make decisions for ourselves and decisions we're making, but also get out the way when the government needs to. So when I actually talk about the issues, I think it makes sense. A lot of conservative folks are against RICO. That's a process that I don't view as democratic. So be in line on there. And in general, I'm about empowering the working class, right? So people who with no income, people with little income, and people with middle income that have high expenses, and they're still getting gentrified out of these areas around town too. So when I'm talking about empowering the working class and empowering everyday people, that captures a broad swath of people. So whenever I'm outdoor knocking, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to somebody in a street organization, the public housing, or talking to somebody in a white, in a poor white neighborhood, but a don't tread on me flag. We can find those commonalities, and I look forward to showing that. I look forward to shocking many in the community who like to pigeonhole me in these specific areas, say I'm just this, I'm just that. When actually, when I say Knoxville for all, I mean Knoxville for all, and I do want it to work for all people. Understanding it's worked well for a few people, and those people we don't need to focus on. We need to focus on who Knoxville isn't working on. And some working class people are liberal, some working class people are conservative. Doesn't matter at the end of the day, they still need to be empowered and have a say in the government.
You put your finger on something that showed up in our most recent city council meetings, actually. We've had a couple people come in from the North Knoxville area and voice their concerns with something that actually took place earlier this year in May. There was a fire that took place in North Knoxville around Chickamauga North Street area. And there are lots of toxic fumes released in that incident, lots of people being affected by it. And all of a sudden being conservative and thinking that the environment isn't important, I didn't hear that come out of anybody's mouths who's actually affected personally by it. So what you say is true. When it's actually in your face, there's a lot of commonality between you and any conservative person you might speak to, right? What other kind of issues have you heard, where there's common ground, where actually Democrats, Republicans, and people who don't like either, more and more people that might describe themselves that way. What other issues have you run into where that's the theme?
There's so many issues. So many people see that we have an issue with poverty, for instance, right? There's so many people who see that there's some people in the city who are making lots of money, who are doing well, but then there's a lot of folks who aren't seeing that wealth, who don't have access to it, and there's more and more folks who understand that it's not just about, it's not just simply how hard you work.
Right.
You'll see a lot of folks saying, "Oh, like how hard you work is how far you go." When we have plenty of people who are working plenty hard, but still haven't been able to, advance, right? So the city government, saying the city government should take an active role in those things, an active role in making sure that people have access to good jobs and living wages, having an active role in making sure that people have access to unions and making sure that people have access to resources to help start their own businesses. That's something I believe in too. People starting their own businesses, working for each other, working for themselves. I prefer a cooperative model, but at the end of the day, especially with Black and brown businesses, we're getting so little contracts from the city. It's ridiculous. So when I talk about economic empowerment, when I talk about people having his say in the city. Even when it comes to some social issues, like the opioid epidemic, for instance. We know in our community we've been having a drug issue,
Right.
since crack, right? It's been an epidemic ever since then. It's just been ups and downs, and sometimes it's crack, sometimes it's heroin, sometimes it's this and that. We've seen that continually, but now it's affecting a lot more people. So now we're able to have a conversation with a lot more people about actually getting down to the root cause.
With a noticeable difference as well in terms of the response.
Noticeable difference. Yeah.
With the Black community,
Yep.
it was always, let's spend more money on police, let's lock them up for longer amounts of time. It's basically what was talked about. One of our candidates running for office, Mr. Joe Biden, actually had a direct hand in writing that 94 crime bill, where that was basically the response. What kind of things can we do now to make sure that isn't the way it's addressed? Of course, as you mentioned, when other communities are affected, that isn't the immediate response. How can we help you with access to rehab? How can we help you with basically healthcare, which is what it should be when a person has an addiction problem? That's the immediate response. How can we create a situation where, if it's an Hispanic community, if it's a Black community, if it's a poor white community, the reaction of let's send the police there and arrest them more, let's put up cameras and get their license plates to arrest them more, isn't necessarily the first go-to response.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a response a lot of times because there's no other options, right? So if you look at the budget, where the money is going, right? The department that gets the most money by far is the police.
Right.
Out of around over $300 million, they get about $56 million. If you add the $56 million that they get about every year, that's about how much they get, $56 million. If you add in the new police station that they're also looking to get, that's over $100 million for policing, right? And we know that's not actually solving the root causes, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much police you send to a poor area, crime and substance abuse and addiction and all these things is going to continue to, be, it's a cycle. It's going to continue to happen.
It's a feature problem.
Yeah, it's exactly. So just putting people in jail and putting them out without any rehab, that's not going to solve the problem. So saying that we need to change our budget so it's actually more social services and preventative care, a lot of these crimes, a lot of things that are happening, it's something happened along the way. If they would have if somebody commits a murder, for instance, like if you look at what happened throughout the day, if there was somebody there who was paid by the city or nonprofit, to like give them a helping hand, to like help them deal with whatever issues they have, help them connect them to a job that actually pays well,
could have been avoided.
It could have been avoided. And there's so many issues like that. So that's why it's important to say that we need more social services coming out of our city budget. We need more community organizations and projects being funded by the city and county, all local government, so we can actually prevent a lot of these things from happening in the first place.
And, you mentioned that decision with Tenova that happened over the course of the last year. Another decision that the city council made earlier this year to deal with our homeless population, as opposed to, as you mentioned, coming up with ways to offer more services, more alternatives for housing. We have lots of houses in Knoxville sitting dormant, by the way. At the same time, we have all these people living under the bridge. And under this new proposal, they're fit to be policed by a private police force that's pretty much going to recommend different ways to, other than arresting them, I didn't see a thing that was being proposed. They said that more services will be available, but those services are after basically a policeman identifies you and deals with you. A lack of diversity on our council, and I mean not demographically, but in terms of history and experience is why I would think a decision like that was made. Obviously, having a person like yourself on the council would be crucial in changing that. But when you first come in, obviously you're going to be one person versus the rest of the council. How would you get them to reconsider decisions like that, change their direction?
Well, that's why. So a key part of the strategy and why I'm running is because I'm running with a slate in the city council movement.
Okay.
So we are building majority on city council.
Gotcha.
So we're not trying to just play the game of trying to convince people who don't respect the human rights of so many people in Knoxville, trying to convince them to do the right thing, right? We're going to be able to do that in certain issues here and there, but it's important that we have an actual majority, an identifiable majority who is accountable to the community and who is saying a lot of the things I'm saying right now. So first off, right, so that's why it's important for not only me to get elected, but Amelia Parker and Charles Bowie and Charles Lomax, and he's also running for an at-large seat. He's not in our slate, but he's a lot better than alternative. So I'm hoping he can get in. So making sure that we have the votes is important regardless. But like, it's staying critical, saying that we are not gonna treat social issues and injustice and ills in our community with criminalization, right? We are not going to do that. Have that strong value that we are not. Our solutions will never be just finding more ways to put people in jail, or even things that they're not being intention. You might not have an intention of throwing people in jail by putting a cop here, putting a security person there. But if you're putting law enforcement in an area where we need social services, where we need mental health professionals, where we need case managers, right, where people need to be connected with resources and the help they need. If we're neglecting that and just putting law enforcement, private or public, regardless, that's actually just perpetuating the problem.
Making it worse.
Just making it worse. And we're not going to be able to convince everybody of that. There'll be some people who we will be able to convince, but the other ones we have to replace, and making sure that ultimately that we have a strong enough voice on city council to get it done.
So, a two-part question: what are those standards for what will make a person viable for that city movement? A candidate that works. And then what is the thing that you see a council member doing, you see a mayor doing, you see any politician doing? It's time for you to go.
Yeah, I mean, so there's just two big things. I would say accountability and courage, right? So being accountable. So if we have 100 people coming to city council one day saying like, "Yo, our community's being neglected in this way. We want this to change. We want to see this happen," right? Being accountable to the community, being accountable to people means you take that in consideration, right? And you understand that those are the people you serve, not the mayor, not the people in government, right? Not the people in state legislature. No, it's those people you serve, right? So every decision you make for the betterment of regular people. And also courage is huge. Courage, we cannot underestimate that. I mean, having a majority, when we have a majority, it's like, you need a little less courage if you have a majority in block. But still, having the courage to say, this is wrong, this is hurting people, this is injustice, we shouldn't be doing this way, and go against the political establishment. Because even if we get a majority on our city council, we're still going against the whole political establishment, right? Mm-hmm. We're still not affecting the county. We don't have a candidate for mayor, right? The mayor, no matter who wins the mayor, we're going to be at odds on some issues, Mm-hmm. So having the courage to speak up, speak the truth, and also understanding that we need movements, right? There's no piece of legislation that happened just because people had a successful electoral campaign and got the people right there. If you look at the New Deal, the reason why that happened was, yes, there was depression, but also labor unions, the CIO. Pressure. The Civil Rights Act. It wasn't because we had some great electoral strategy to get all these like senators elected and House of Representatives folks elected. No, it was by having a movement, right?
Socialists.
Yeah. But it was a movement involved the communities all across the country and all across the world fighting back against things and saying we want things to be different, and that's why we had those major pieces of legislation. So saying even on the city level, we're gonna have to continue to cultivate and build our movement, a movement of people in Knoxville and communities who want it to work for everybody, who want the city to work for everybody. Mm-hmm. We're gonna need that movement for us to get done the bigger ideas that we have at the city level.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware, during that movement in the 1920s and 30s, the AFL-CIO, labor unions.
Well, that was before they joined. It was just the CIO.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But during that time, they were carrying out and out socialists. People who were completely socialists.
Running for president, getting millions of votes. People
reading their books. It was not a problem. Today, if a person runs, obviously your association with Democratic Socialists of America, this bridge has already been crossed for you.
Yeah.
But for a lot of candidates, the word being spoken, it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
What kind of ideas is it important for us to get across to dispel that kind of stigma? Mm-hmm. And once that's done, what kind of ideas work the best in terms of making people aware that these policies, these movements, these ideas are ones that are really just about making your lives better?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's all these things about socialism and like what isn't, and like it don't work for us. What I'm talking about is people having a say in their communities, having a say in their economy, having a say in their government, and saying anything that affects you, you should have a say in, a democratic say in. And saying that we can't trust a small amount of people to govern and make decisions for a lot of us. All of us have to be involved in decisions that affect our lives, and that's actually in the African tradition, the Black tradition, right? If you look past the struggle as far as like the civil rights movement beforehand, W.E.B. Du Bois and NAACP, the kind of the roots of that. You know, a lot of those folks was Marxists and socialists and anarchists and understood, and anti-capitalists who understood that within this current economic and political system, right, that we have no power, and saying that we need a different system in order for us to have power. So every, like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all like, you know, those were like so many of those folks in the movement were socialists. You know, if you take a Pan-African stance at this, right? So saying that like we as Africans, we as Black people, we're part of a larger diaspora and we're all connected, and our freedom is connected to the African continent, right? And saying that we need Africa to be free. Pan-Africanism is saying that we need Africa to be free under a socialist government, under a socialist economy, which is democratic and people have a say, but is united, right? If you look at all throughout the 60s and the 70s and all the revolts and the revolutions in Africa, a lot of those folks were socialists and Marxists. So to me, I don't shy away from learning from those things. I'm heavily inspired by socialism. I'm heavily inspired by anarchism. I'm heavily inspired by anti-capitalism and other ways of being. And I think that we do need to go a different route from the establishment, from the current political economic system, if we ever want to be free, if we ever want to see liberation.
So that's the priorities and the ideas on kind of a grand scale. Bringing it back local for Knoxville. What would you say are the 3 policies that once you're in office, these are the ones that you're pushing for, you want to see happen?
So our contracts. So we spend about $50 million in contracts every year. Less than 1% of that goes to Black contractors. So that's one thing that we need to end. We need to understand that as an injustice, and also exploit the opportunity to dramatically increase the capacity of Black businesses and brown businesses in Knoxville, and also unions as well. Unions is very critical as well. So making sure we have better contracting. There's something right now. The mayor of Knoxville proposed a resolution to make sure that the city of Knoxville is, by 2030, cuts in half its emissions, and by 2050 cuts its emissions, the citywide cuts its emissions by 80%. So I'm going to fully support that, you know, and I can look at that as an opportunity, as an economic opportunity as well as a social opportunity, you know, saying that, yes, we need to clean up all the pollution that we have, but also we need to create institutions and enterprises and businesses to do that work, and make sure those are working class people and Black and brown people who are doing that, you know, so supporting that initiative. And being bolder as well, and another thing, and the affordable housing. So Justice Knox has a proposal for an affordable housing trust fund. That's something I fully support. The city doesn't have one currently. It's saying that the community should get together and decide the priorities of this trust fund, right? Of this money, how it's spent, because there's so many different types of housing needs, right? From transitional housing to permanent housing to making sure people don't get kicked out of the house in the first place, right? There's a variety of different ways to go. So bringing the community in for set those priorities, having a community oversight board to making sure it's all being done, you know, that this is spent how the community wants it, you know, and bringing those down. Right now we have a community development office, which is already holds, you know, all the federal and state money when it comes to affordable housing. So they're already kind of centralized, so we don't have to do that much work. But the biggest thing in this affordable housing trust fund that sets it apart is making sure it has a dedicated source of revenue, right? So I don't believe I'm raising taxes on working class people. Like I said, people with low income, no income, and medium income with high expenses. I don't want to raise taxes on those folks. But we have millionaires and billionaires who are paying low wages to people and paying low taxes, right? And they're not contributing. And we have a regressive sales tax that takes the most out of poor people's income than the wealthier folks, right? So it's about time that we looked at sources of revenue to pay for these things that we need, and look at the people who have been paying the least in our society.
In other areas of the country, legalizing things like marijuana, for example, have opened huge doors. In the state of Colorado, their education budget has been transformed. They've gone from a place where we are now, where they're laying off teachers, like Knoxville is doing, and has been doing for a while, to a place where their budget is flush, moving forward into decades based on those taxes. If that were to come up for a vote, you know, how would you urge? I'll skip past the obvious. You would support, yes? How would you support those people who may be more reticent? What would be your argument to say to them, this is a change we need to make? I
mean, first, just looking at the situation for what it is. Not only in California are they getting so many tax benefits from it, and able to pay folks right, and able to like invest more in social service and all those things that help, you know, public life. But also people's making money, right? We got people becoming millionaires, right? Creating jobs, right? But we have people who, especially there's mostly white folks, right? These are mostly white populations who's able to, you know, not all, you know, there's like some black women who's like doing great, but for the most part, we're talking about white men, right? Who are making all this money in this new economy, while at the same time we have thousands of black folks being put in jail for the exact same thing, you know. So that's an unjust equation going on right now, right? So it's, you know, so it's about telling people what's real, what's, you know, like looking at a situation for what it is, about how unjust it is, looking at the opportunities that we have, and mobilizing our base of folks who already see the issue. You know, there are some people we need to convince, but also we need to convince some people who, you know, who just need the education, but we need to mobilize all the people who already agree. It's like, yo, as a community, this is what we want, right? Let's go to the city council meeting every week and get this done. You know, actually mobilizing, you know, using a diversity of tactics is definitely important, and tackling it from as many sides as we can. So looking at all the ways that they criminalize drugs like marijuana and like pushing back against that. So making it harder for officers to do things like arrest people. We're already moving towards a citation instead of arrest, you know, for when it comes to marijuana. So I think expanding that to other drugs as well, and other practices such as like sex work as well, but also making sure people don't have huge fines. You know, just lowering, and if we can as a city, you know, we need to be ready to, you know, fight back against a state legislator who might say like, oh, you can't decriminalize this, oh, you can't stop arresting, stop giving citations like this. We need to have the courage to do what we can. Say, no, we're taking you to court. We can do this. We need to be able to do this. And this is actually going to be good for our economy. This is going to be good for communities. It's going to help stop cycles of violence and displacement and dysfunction in our communities, right? And it's also going to provide us a good source of revenue.
And the irony you always find when you're in a Republican state, you know, again, the show is actually called Behind Enemy Lines, with the concept being progressives living in an area where politics in general are not friendly to progressives. So behind enemy lines, right? So here behind enemy lines, you find that these people who want smaller government, they hate the government coming in and taking away their freedom. They hate their choices being evaluated by these liberals in California and New York, are totally fine with all of those things happening if we're talking about somebody having a plant that they don't like. They're fine with jackbooted thugs kicking in somebody's door, aiming guns at them, taking away their rights, and for big government
controlling people's bodies
to arrest them if a plant that they don't personally smoke is in their possession. All of those principles that they were so dedicated to seem to go right out the window. So the irony, though, is that is less and less true even for Republican voters. Younger Republican voters seem to be simpatico with young Democrats, young liberals, young people unaffiliated on marijuana. It seems to be closer and closer to a point where it almost seems pointless to continue to resist. What are the reasons given, or what do you hear from the people in power why they continue this?
I mean, the war on drugs, right? So the war on drugs wasn't a very intentional war on black and poor people. I think we have to understand it as such. It makes there's no scientific reasoning why that marijuana should be illegal when alcohol is legal, right? There's no reason, right?
That's pharmaceuticals,
you know, and like, right. Well, but like, you know, logically, there's no reason, you know, there's no reason for that. And so when we look at you know, this war on marijuana, this war on drugs, you know, we look at the effect of it has on us, right? It's been putting us in jail. It's been putting us in prison. It's a matter of social control, keeping us where they want it. They're now making profits off of us when we go to prison. We have private prisons now full of folks in there for marijuana, right? So it's actually a whole industry. Our so-called criminal justice system, right, is a whole industry of which marijuana criminalization is very crucial in, right? So people are making money and people have jobs based off of people going to jail. So whenever you have that much interest in it, you know, it's just gonna be hard to beat. That's why you find it's more like, you know, it's whenever white folks and areas with more predominantly white folks who are pushing back, they're able to see results. When it's black folks pushing back against this thing, you know, it's just, okay, we're sending more police there, more criminalization to it. So to me, it's very clear. It's very clear, like, it's it's very clear that not only black people, but also poor people as well, but especially black people, this is a plot, a very successful way to keep us enslaved.
So it's crazy because the old saying is it's the universal unifier, right? It's this thing that unifies everybody. And then when you get down to statistics, it's actually true. The usage rates between whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, they're virtually the same. We're talking about like literally a percentage point away, almost as though these kids all go to college and smoke in their rooms together or something.
Yeah.
But even if that's true now and it's illegal, these college kids are going to be these people that come into office one day, make these decisions, change that, and set a whole new standard. So don't be afraid. Go ahead and speak your voices. Say what you need to on the subject. People in our age range, I'm talking to people in the future. People in our age range are going to have to deal with this transitional phase. But I'm talking about teenagers in the 2020s and beyond. You should not be dealing with this question that we're discussing right now. If so, I'm so sorry. But I need you to change that right now. Back to our But final thought really is, when it comes to community involvement, just overall, as a larger concept.
Yeah.
Again, what kind of things do you think will make people come out and get involved? And what kind of things do they need to pay attention to now, even when there isn't a sexy headline? What kind of things happen in these city council meetings right now that maybe they should be paying more attention to?
Yes, I think people get involved once you have a sense they have a say in what's going on. So if you feel like no matter who you vote for, nothing in your life is going to change, why vote?
Right.
You know, why vote if you can't make that connection, or that connection isn't being made at all? You know, so making sure that people have something to vote for, to me, is just as crucial as telling people to go vote in the first place. So having something for people to vote for, you know, and I think that looks like having an actual accountable candidate. I actually want to show Knoxville what it means to be accountable. I don't think folks really know. I don't think folks is really ready for somebody who actually feels accountable to them instead of the powers that be. You know, so some of it's like showing people what this is and how it should be, how politics should work. You know, but you know, and also just like I said before, opening up the government and opening up the democratic process. So, like the budget, for instance, you know, or like a recode, for instance. Whenever we make these big decisions, the government should go out of its way to invest resources into creating infrastructure that people can participate in, so people can directly have a say in things that affects their lives. So yeah, that's crucial.
Gotcha. Well, let the people know where they can find you. Where can they participate, give? You know, here on Behind Enemy Lines, we're going to be covering this election coming up. It starts again on August 7th, Knoxville. Early voting starts. You can vote all the way through August 27th. This is the primary. In November is when the general election comes. So pay attention, participate. Where can we find you, man? So
at Vote David Hayes. So votedavidhayes.com. Vote David Hayes on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And also the City Council Movement. So on Facebook, it's 2019 City Council Movement Knoxville. City Council Movement at gmail.com. Look us up. If you want to canvass, if you want to volunteer, please get involved in the City Council Movement. That's how all of our canvasses are happening. If you want to donate to the campaign, visit votedavidhayes.com. And reach out to us. Send us a message about what you think. We would love any input or any feedback we can get from folks in the community.
Oh man,
thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, August, I'm gonna be there. You got my vote. I'm biased. Yes, he has my vote. But pay attention. If you have criticisms, leave it in the comments. If you have questions, David's available. Send the questions. Send the comments. We're fully ready to participate. He's telling you that he's going to be a person that's accountable. Visit the page. Thanks, y'all.